This was a bizarre and shocking case that rocked Japan, spanning several years and involving a vast network of individuals. After the perpetrator was arrested, a series of strange and inexplicable events unfolded. More than 10 people connected to the case, including witnesses, police officers, and journalists, mysteriously died within a few years. It was as if an invisible hand was pulling the strings, manipulating those involved. This case has long been known as Japan's #1. One unsolved mystery. Let's turn back time to 1963 and uncover the chilling details of this case. Our story takes place in Sayama, located in the southwestern part of Saitama Prefecture, Japan. At 6:30 p.m. on May 1st, 1963, the air was fresh and crisp after a rain shower, and a gentle breeze swept across the fields, creating a peaceful atmosphere. But Nakata Kenji was in no mood to enjoy the scenery. He was worried about his younger sister, who was supposed to be home from school by now. His sister, Nakata Yoshiko, was the 4th child in the family and a 10th grade student at Kawago High School. Normally, she would have returned home by this time, but tonight she was nowhere to be found. It was also her birthday. Had she gone out with friends to celebrate? Even if she had, wouldn't she have told her family? As the sky darkened, Kenji grew more anxious. Waiting around wasn't going to help, so he decided to go to her school to check. 10 minutes later, he arrived and found that her classroom was already empty and the doors were locked. With no other clues, he searched the nearby streets and alleyways, but she was nowhere to be found. At 7:30 p.m., Kenji returned home. Just as he was about to open the front door, a white envelope stuck in the doorframe caught his attention. Curious, he opened it, only to be horrified. It was a ransom note. The message in the letter was chilling. Listen carefully. Your child is in my hands. If you want them to survive, at exactly midnight on May 2nd, send a woman to deliver 200,000 yen to the Sonoya store. My associate will arrive by car. Hand the money to him. If you are even 1 minute late, you will never see your child alive again. If you contact the police, the child will die. If my driver does not return safely and on time, the child's body will be found in the Seibuan pond. Go there if you want to see for yourself. If my driver returns unharmed, I will return the child 1 hour later, safe and sound. Do not call the police. Do not tell your neighbors. If you do, the child will die. If anyone else is present when you retrieve the money, I will immediately return and kill the child. Inside the envelope, along with the ransom note, was Yoshiko's ID card. This was no joke. The kidnapping was real. Kenji immediately rushed to his parents, delivering the horrifying news that his sister had been abducted. The entire family panicked, their minds racing with fear. Although the letter repeatedly warned them not to involve the police after discussing their options, the family felt that reporting the crime was the only reliable choice. At 7:50 p.m., the Nakata family filed a report with the local police. After receiving the report, the police immediately launched an operation. To avoid detection by the kidnappers, officers disguised themselves as farmers and quickly arrived at the scene. After thoroughly examining the ransom note, they discovered several strange details. First, the letter was written in blue ballpoint pen. The handwriting was sloppy, and there were numerous erasures. The envelope initially addressed the recipient as Young Master, an unusual form of address, which was later crossed out and replaced with the victim's father's name. At the beginning of the letter, Young Master was written again, but was later scratched out. The ransom deadline was also altered. It was originally April 29th, but was changed to May 2nd. Additionally, the drop-off location was modified. It was first written as Front Entrance, but later changed to Sonoya Store. However, there was a major flaw. Sonoya did not even have a front entrance. Second, the letter contained multiple spelling and grammatical errors, with some sentences appearing unnatural and awkward. Third, the paper showed signs of wear, with creases and crumpled areas. Based on these details, investigators speculated that the kidnapper may have had a low level of education. The police formed a special task force and devised a meticulous plan to apprehend the kidnapper and rescue the hostage on the day of the ransom exchange. Since the note mentioned that the kidnapper would drive to collect the money, officers stationed a large number of personnel along key roads near the store and potential escape routes. The kidnapper specifically requested a woman to deliver the ransom. To avoid suspicion, the police suggested that the Nakata family's second daughter carry out the exchange. Confident in their operation, the police mobilized 40 officers, strategically spreading them across various locations near the exchange site, waiting for the kidnapper to fall into their trap. At 11:55 p.m. on May 2nd, Nakata's second daughter stood in front of Sonoya's store, holding a large bag. Inside was 200,000 yen in ransom money, but most of it was counterfeit, with only the top layer consisting of real bills. Meanwhile, the 40 officers were split into two teams, one hiding in the tea plantations and bushes near the store, and the other stationed along nearby streets, ready to block any escape attempt. At 12:10 a.m., a shadowy figure suddenly emerged on a small path in front of Sonoya's store. The kidnapper had arrived. The police and the Nakata family were on high alert. The suspect was extremely cautious. Instead of approaching the store immediately, he stood at a distance, engaging in a brief conversation with Nakata's second daughter for about 12 minutes. Just when everything seemed to be going smoothly, an unexpected incident occurred. At 12:25 a.m., the kidnapper suddenly became suspicious. He shouted loudly, "Hey! You called the police, didn't you? There are two officers over there." Without hesitation, he turned and sprinted into a narrow dirt path near the fields. Within seconds, he vanished without a trace. The incident happened so suddenly that the officers stationed near Sonoya's store were too far away to chase after the suspect. Meanwhile, the other police unit was still waiting on the road for the suspect's car, only to realize they had been completely deceived. The kidnapper never arrived by car. Instead, he had come on foot using a small farm path. The narrow dirt trails through the fields were like a maze, and with pitch-black darkness covering the area, tracking him down was nearly impossible. Just like that, the kidnapper escaped right before the eyes of 40 police officers. Frustrated, the police immediately began searching in the direction he had disappeared. By morning, they discovered a trail of footprints across the fields, leading to an area south of Gongan Bridge. However, the trail ended at a river, where police dogs lost the scent, suggesting the suspect had crossed the water to escape. The footprints belonged to a person wearing tabi shoes. Based on the size and depth of the prints, investigators concluded the suspect was an adult male. In Japan, tabi refers to traditional split-toe socks and footwear, commonly worn by workers or manual laborers. The police launched a large-scale search in the area where the footprints disappeared. Soon they discovered a pig farm near Gongan Bridge, an area primarily inhabited by Burakumin. The Burakumin were the descendants of the lowest social caste in Japan's feudal era. For centuries, they lived in segregated areas, working in unclean professions such as funeral services, butchery, leather tanning, and garbage collection. Because of this historical discrimination, Burakumin communities remained impoverished, with limited educational opportunities and higher crime rates than the general population. Suspiciously, the owner's older brother and dozens of workers at the pig farm had criminal records, including assault, extortion, theft, and robbery. An even more unsettling coincidence was that Gongan Bridge was the exact route Yoshiko would have taken to walk home from school. This raised serious suspicions. The police immediately searched the pig farm, questioning the manager about any suspicious individuals seen in the area. However, after a thorough investigation, they found no solid clues. The manager claimed to know nothing, and Yoshiko was nowhere to be found. With no immediate leads, the case reached a deadlock. To gather more information, on the morning of May 2nd, the Saitama Prefectural Police Department held a press conference. During the announcement, the chief of police declared, "I am certain the perpetrator is a local. We will solve this case soon." Following the press conference, 90 investigators conducted an extensive search around the crime scene area. Their efforts soon paid off. They discovered Yoshiko's bicycle abandoned in a forest. Later, a local farmer reported something suspicious. Around 3 a.m. on May 2nd, he had been awakened by the intense barking of his dogs in a wheat field nearby. Since the time and location were highly suspicious, the police immediately dispatched officers to investigate the wheat field. What they found was a chilling breakthrough. At 10:30 a.m. on May 4th, officers discovered the body of a young girl buried in the dirt along a narrow farm path. Beside the body, they found a rope, which led them to suspect that it had been used to drag the victim's body. After comparing the photographs, authorities confirmed that the body belonged to Yoshiko, the missing girl. The Nakata family was devastated upon hearing the news of their daughter's death. They blamed the police for their incompetence. There were 40 officers on site that night, yet they failed to catch the suspect, which ultimately led to Yoshiko's murder. That evening, the forensic team conducted an autopsy. The results indicated that Yoshiko had died around 4:20 p.m. on May 1st, meaning she had been killed even before the ransom was demanded. Based on the wide ligature marks around her neck, the forensic team determined the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. She had been strangled. Her body showed multiple external injuries, and semen was found inside her. Additionally, forensic examiners discovered skin fragments under her fingernails, presumably from her attacker. Unfortunately, DNA technology at the time was not advanced enough to identify the perpetrator, and investigators could only determine that the suspect had blood type B. News of Yoshiko's death spread rapidly, causing a public outcry. Everywhere, people criticized the police, as just 3 years earlier, there had been a similar kidnapping case, which took authorities 2 years to solve. The public's dissatisfaction with law enforcement had already been growing, and this incident only fueled their anger further. Under intense pressure from the public, the chief of police resigned. In response, the police department formed a special investigative team consisting of 165 officers, promising the public that they would solve the case swiftly. The prime lead investigators decided to pursue was the suspicious pig farm. On the afternoon of May 4th, the investigative team questioned the pig farm manager again regarding any unusual events in the area. This time, the manager appeared visibly nervous. After racking his brain, he finally remembered something. A shovel had recently gone missing from the farm. Investigators asked him to file a written report about the missing tool and proceeded to collect blood samples from all 27 farm workers. By a stroke of luck, at around 5 p.m. on May 11th, police discovered a shovel in a wheat field, the very place where Yoshiko's body had been buried. Upon examination, traces of soil on the shovel matched the soil found on the victim's body, leading investigators to suspect that this was the murder weapon. Based on the shovel's design and the presence of cooking oil on its handle, police confirmed that it had originally belonged to the pig farm. Around the same time, the blood test results came back. Among all the farm workers, only one person had blood type B, 24-year-old Ishikawa Kazuo. Even more suspicious, before the blood test, Ishikawa had falsely claimed to have blood type A in an attempt to avoid suspicion. This immediately raised red flags for investigators. Of course, blood type evidence alone was not enough to convict him. Investigators then compared his handwriting to the ransom letter and discovered that 2 of the writing strokes were nearly identical. This only increased their suspicion. As a burakuman, Ishikawa had only completed elementary school before being expelled due to his aggressive behavior. He was notorious for leading mischief in school, and his teachers described him as having poor cooperation skills, lacking responsibility, and showing no sense of justice. After dropping out of school, Ishikawa worked at a metal foundry, but after losing a finger in a lathe accident, he was forced to quit his job. He then jumped between various jobs, working as a babysitter, an apprentice at a shoe store, and a porter. Eventually, he got involved with a gang in Sayama and became addicted to gambling. He frequently lost all his money and was often so broke that he couldn't even afford a meal. In 1961, Ishikawa was fired for stealing from a factory. By October 1962, he started working at the pig farm, where he began a new career as a thief. On November 19th, he collaborated with the farm manager to steal 16 cedar logs from a construction site. On January 7th, 1963, the two stole 120 bundles of thatch. At the end of January, Ishikawa stole 3 chickens from a local resident. On March 6th, he stole 2 more. The next day, March 7th, he stole a co-worker's uniform. Beyond theft, he was also involved in fights and disturbances, constantly causing trouble wherever he went. With such a long history of criminal behavior, the police had every reason to suspect that Ishikawa had stolen the shovel and kidnapped Yoshiko. More importantly, investigators learned that on May 4th, when Yoshiko's body was discovered, Ishikawa had visited the crime scene and casually remarked to his friends, "There are so many people gathered here, I could make money selling ice cream." Most people would have felt shock or fear upon seeing such a crime scene, yet he made a cold, indifferent joke. Combined with the matching blood type and handwriting similarities, investigators decided to arrest him first and investigate further later. However, before they could act, Ishikawa was already arrested by local police for theft and fighting. During a search of his home, police found a 35-centimeter-long rubber strap, approximately 1 centimeter in diameter. It closely resembled a part from Yoshiko's bicycle, further increasing suspicions. After Ishikawa was taken into custody, police intensified their interrogations in an effort to solve the case quickly. However, he remained stubborn, insisting on his innocence. When questioned about his whereabouts at the time of the crime, Ishikawa claimed that on May 1st, he and his older brother had worked from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. repairing a roof at a nearby house. Afterward, he said he stayed home and went to bed around 9 p.m., never leaving the house that night. He also claimed that on May 2nd, he slept at home all night. Although his family testified to confirm his alibi, the structure of their home allowed Ishikawa to leave unnoticed, meaning his family's testimony was unreliable. Regarding the handwriting resemblance, Ishikawa dismissed it, saying, "We're all Japanese. Of course our handwriting looks similar." Over the course of 20 days of intense interrogation, Ishikawa continued to deny any involvement, but police managed to gather substantial evidence against him. Lie detector test results. When asked if he had participated in the kidnapping, strangling, and burial of Yoshiko, his responses showed highly abnormal reactions, raising suspicions. Forensic evidence, hairs similar to Ishikawa's, were found on Yoshiko's body, further implicating him in the crime. His mother's testimony. According to Ishikawa's mother, on May 3rd, he slept until noon, which police believed was due to exhaustion from secretly traveling to the ransom drop-off location at midnight. Bicycle racing connection. Ishikawa regularly participated in bicycle races, which were often held at Sabuin Velodrome, the same Sabuin pond mentioned in the ransom letter, further linking him to the crime. The Nakata family's second daughter stated that Ishikawa's voice closely resembled that of the kidnapper on the night of the ransom exchange. On June 9th, police discovered several pairs of tabi shoes in Ishikawa's home. When compared to the footprints found at the crime scene, they were a perfect match. Initially, Ishikawa claimed the shoes belonged to his older brother, but when police asked him to try them on, they fit him perfectly, just as investigators had anticipated. All evidence pointed directly to Ishikawa as the murderer. As a result, on June 17th, right after his family posted bail for his release, he was immediately rearrested before he could even leave the police station, facing charges of trespassing, kidnapping, and murder. After Ishikawa's arrest, Nakata Kenji, the victim's older brother, stated, "I am certain the murderer was someone who worked in agriculture because whoever killed my sister managed to dig through hardened soil to bury her. A regular person wouldn't have been able to do it so precisely, and I don't believe Ishikawa acted alone. There must have been an accomplice." Initially, Ishikawa vehemently denied all accusations, but strangely, 3 days later, he suddenly changed his testimony, admitting partial involvement in Yoshiko's death. He claimed that 2 former co-workers from the pig farm had sexually assaulted and murdered Yoshiko, and that his only involvement was writing the ransom letter and stealing the shovel. He even drew a detailed map of the crime scene. On May 21st, following Ishikawa's map, police found Yoshiko's school bag. However, Ishikawa's behavior soon became even more erratic. On May 23rd, he retracted his previous statement, now claiming that he had no accomplices and had committed the crime alone. He provided a detailed confession of the entire crime. At around 3:50 p.m. on May 1st, I was wandering near the school when I saw Yoshiko riding her bike home. I approached her to start a conversation, but she ignored me. I felt embarrassed and angry, which made me want to take revenge. At around 4:30 p.m., I assaulted her and strangled her to death. I temporarily hid her body in a potato hole. At 7 p.m., I rode my bicycle to the Nakata family home and placed the ransom letter in the door. On my way back, I stole a shovel from the pig farm. At 8 p.m., I buried her body and threw the shovel into the wheat field. Over the next several days, police continued to uncover additional evidence supporting Ishikawa's confession. On June 26th, investigators found Yoshiko's fountain pen inside Ishikawa's home. On July 2nd, they discovered her wristwatch in the wheat field. Additionally, police located several eyewitnesses who confirmed key details of Ishikawa's movements. A tricycle driver had seen Ishikawa on his way to deliver the ransom letter, and when questioned, the driver confirmed seeing him that night. Police also found a farmer whom Ishikawa had asked for directions to the Nakata family's home. With both witness testimony and physical evidence complete, on July 9, 1963, Ishikawa was officially indicted on charges of trespassing, murder, corpse disposal, and extortion. During his first trial hearing, he fully admitted to his crimes and solemnly declared, "If I harmed another person without feeling remorse, then even God would not remain silent. No matter how I am punished, I will accept it without complaint." On March 11, 1964, Ishikawa was sentenced to death for multiple charges. But this was far from the end of the story. In fact, it was just the beginning. The very next day, after being sentenced to death, Ishikawa suddenly filed an appeal, claiming that he had only confessed because the police had coerced and manipulated him. His statement sent shockwaves through the public. On September 10, 1964, his appeal hearing was held at the Tokyo High Court. During the hearing, Ishikawa retracted his confession, stating that he had never harmed Yoshiko. He claimed that he was forced to confess because he couldn't endure the intense interrogations and threats from the police. In court, Ishikawa revealed what Detective Tanibe Umakichi allegedly told him. "Ishikawa, how long are you going to keep being stubborn? Why don't you just tell us that you killed her? If you do, we'll let you out in 10 years. After all, you've done plenty of bad things over the past 10 years. Either way, you won't be getting out anytime soon. Just say it. I killed her. 10 years from now, I promise you'll be released." Ishikawa claimed that he only confessed because of this promise. But now, facing a death sentence instead of a 10-year term, he realized that the police had lied to him. However, Detective Umakichi adamantly denied ever making such a promise, stating, "I never promised anything." At this point, the court was clearly inclined to believe the police over Ishikawa. To prove his innocence, Ishikawa once again provided an alibi for the day of the crime. But this time, it was completely different from his previous statements. At 7 a.m. on May 1st, I left the house with my lunch, pretending to go to work. But instead, I rode my bike to Seibuen and played there for 2 hours. After that, I went to a pachinko parlor to continue having fun. Around 2 p.m., I was about to head home when an acquaintance from a fruit store asked if I wanted to play pachinko with him. I declined. Around 4 p.m., it started raining, so I took shelter under the station's roof. The rain got heavier, so I stayed there for over 3 hours. It wasn't until after 7 p.m. that I finally went home. After that, I didn't go out again. This completely contradicted his previous testimony, making his story even less credible. The police questioned the owner of the pachinko parlor and the fruit store clerk, but neither of them could remember seeing Ishikawa on May 1st. Additionally, police discovered another chilling piece of information. While in prison, Ishikawa had reportedly told a fellow inmate, "Even though I've been sentenced to death, I can still get out in 10 or 15 years. I'm only 25 now, so I'll be out by the time I'm 40. Once I'm released, someone will give me money. I wasn't alone in this crime. We killed that girl together. It was so easy." In the end, the Tokyo High Court rejected Ishikawa's appeal, upholding his death sentence. Just when everyone thought the case was finally over, a series of eerie events unfolded, making this case one of Japan's greatest mysteries. In the years following Ishikawa's conviction, people connected to the case began dying mysteriously. On May 6, 1963, a former landlord of the Nakata family, Okutomi Genji, 31 years old, who had previously been considered a suspect by the police, drank pesticide and jumped into a well, committing suicide. On May 11th, a key witness, Tanaka Noboru, who had provided important leads to the police, stabbed himself in the chest and died. By the end of May, a young man who lived at the same address as Ishikawa's family mysteriously disappeared. Police had previously suspected him of being Ishikawa's accomplice. On March 18, 1964, the president of the Japan Education Promotion Association, who had stood next to Yoshiko's sister during the ransom exchange and had heard the kidnapper's voice, suddenly died of a cerebral hemorrhage, shortly after Ishikawa's death sentence was issued. On July 14, 1964, Yoshiko's sister, Nakata died after consuming pesticide. On October 24, 1966, the older brother of the pig farm manager was hit and killed by a train in a so-called accident. However, the railway log for that day was mysteriously destroyed. On February 14, 1967, the person who had discovered and reported Yoshiko's watch as evidence during Ishikawa's appeal trial died suddenly. On January 28, 1968, the chief prosecutor of the case died of a cerebral hemorrhage at his home in Urawa City. On December 25, 1970, the forensic doctor who had conducted the autopsy for the case went missing for a long time. Eventually, his body was discovered aboard a ship docked in a port in Thailand. On October 4, 1977, Yoshiko's second eldest brother, Nakata Yoshio, was found hanged. His death was officially attributed to financial failure and overwhelming stress. On December 19, 1977, journalist Saki Juzo, who had been relentlessly investigating the Sayama case, was attacked in a small alley and died 2 days later. Additionally, a co-worker of Ishikawa from the pig farm, who had testified during the July 1966 trial, also died under mysterious circumstances. Each of these individuals was closely connected to the case, yet they all either committed suicide or died in so-called accidents. The sheer number of deaths was too coincidental. More than 10 people died under suspicious circumstances, and when people thought deeply about it, the pattern was terrifying. Anyone with a keen eye could see that this was not a coincidence. This looked like a cover-up. If there truly was a dark force operating behind the scenes, the power behind it must have been immense. Further investigations revealed that Yoshiko's family was wealthy, and her father, Nakata, was not only a landowner, but also a government official. This raised an unsettling question. Could someone have orchestrated the case to seize the Nakata family's fortune? After all, both Yoshiko's brother and sister later died mysteriously. If this theory held any truth, then Ishikawa's original appeal, where he claimed he was forced to confess, might actually have been credible. He may have been nothing more than a scapegoat, caught in a battle of powerful interests. As the series of mysterious deaths continued, public suspicion grew, and people began discussing the case more openly. During this time, the Buraku Liberation League issued a statement claiming that Ishikawa had been wrongfully convicted. The Buraku Liberation League was a political organization in Japan dedicated to eliminating discrimination against the Burakumin community. Since Ishikawa had appealed on the grounds of being coerced into confessing, and because the case directly impacted the Burakumin community, the Buraku Liberation League stepped in to protect his rights. On March 13, 1970, the organization officially declared that the Sayama trial was an example of systemic discrimination and demanded a retrial in court. At first, the court dismissed the issue, not considering it to be of much importance. However, things quickly escalated beyond expectations. At the time, millions of Burakumin lived in Japan, facing widespread discrimination in various aspects of life. Ishikawa's case made many people believe that the government did not even see them as human beings. Whenever a problem arose, Burakumin were simply used as scapegoats. As a way to release their long-suppressed frustration, the Burakumin community rallied behind Ishikawa, treating him as a hero who dared to stand up against the system. Protesters chanted slogans in support of him and held nationwide demonstrations. The movement had a massive impact on Japanese society at the time. Even international media began covering the case, drawing further attention to the issue. Under mounting pressure from advocacy groups, on October 31, 1974, the Tokyo High Court overturned the original ruling. Ishikawa's death sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. The court's justification for this decision was, considering the newly emerging mitigating factors found in the case records, the original death sentence imposed on the defendant was excessively harsh and inappropriate. Even after his sentence was commuted, Ishikawa refused to accept his fate. He persistently maintained his innocence and filed 2 appeals requesting a retrial of the Sayama case, the first on August 30, 1977, and the second on August 20, 1986. However, both appeals were rejected. Despite this, Ishikawa never gave up. While in prison, he dedicated himself to studying by reading extensively and even began writing letters of gratitude to those who supported him. He also wrote poetry praising the Buraku Liberation League. Strangely enough, his poems won the first Buraku Liberation Literature Prize, the Special Poetry Award, in 1975. His father accepted the award on his behalf. This transformed Ishikawa's public image, portraying him as a wrongly convicted poet. More and more people began believing in his innocence, and the movement to expose the alleged injustices of the Sayama case gained momentum. To ease public unrest, on December 21, 1994, after 31 years and 7 months of incarceration, the court finally granted his request for early release. This decision sparked significant controversy. Some argued that the court had acted recklessly, releasing a murderer simply to calm public unrest. On the other hand, Ishikawa's supporters insisted that freeing an innocent man was the only just outcome. Although Ishikawa was released, the stigma of being a murderer still followed him. Determined to clear his name, he continued to fight for a retrial even after gaining his freedom. On May 23, 2006, he submitted his third request for a retrial to the Tokyo High Court. By this time, the case had evolved beyond a simple kidnapping for ransom. It had become a nationwide political and class struggle. Ishikawa now had a growing number of supporters backing him. If he succeeded in overturning his conviction, it would not only be a personal victory, but also a triumph for the Buraku Liberation League and, on a larger scale, for the countless Burakumen who had suffered systemic discrimination. All eyes were on this third appeal. If the court wanted to reject it this time, they would have to be extremely cautious. In September 2009, the court, prosecutors, and defense attorneys met to discuss the case and agreed to publicly release evidence for reinvestigation. The court then assigned 11 experts to re-examine the case. As the investigation deepened, glaring issues in the original evidence began to emerge. The ransom note. A literary expert determined that Ishikawa was nearly illiterate at the time of the crime. He had little formal education and could barely write. This meant he couldn't have composed the ransom letter. Using computerized handwriting analysis, forensic experts found a 99.9% probability that the note was written by someone else. This strongly suggested that Ishikawa had been framed. Fingerprint analysis. A forensic fingerprint specialist noted that, according to Ishikawa's previous statements, his fingerprints should have been on the ransom letter and envelope if he had indeed written and delivered it. However, fingerprint analysis found no trace of Ishikawa's prints on either document, proving that he never handled the ransom letter. Footprint evidence. The footprints left at the crime scene were reanalyzed using a 3D scanner. The results showed that they did not match the tabi shoes found in Ishikawa's home, directly contradicting the original evidence used to convict him. The fountain pen. According to court records, Yoshiko's fountain pen was found in Ishikawa's home during the third police search. However, during the first 2 searches, more than 10 officers had scoured the house for hours and never found the pen, which was supposedly left on a doorframe. Experts found this highly suspicious. To test whether the pen could realistically have been missed, forensic psychologists replicated the search conditions. In their simulation, 12 test participants, including amateur university students with no search experience, were able to find the pen on the doorframe within 30 minutes. Given that more than 10 trained officers had failed to find the pen twice, despite searching for hours, experts concluded that this was highly implausible. Moreover, scientific analysis revealed that the pen did not belong to Yoshiko at all. An examination of the ink Yoshiko used in school showed it contained chromium. However, the fountain pen used as evidence contained no traces of chromium. Using X-ray fluorescence analysis, forensic experts scientifically confirmed that the pen was not Yoshiko's, further undermining the case against Ishikawa. Cause of death. Ishikawa had originally confessed that he strangled Yoshiko to death with his bare hands. However, the forensic autopsy concluded that Yoshiko had actually been strangled using a piece of fabric, not manual strangulation. This directly contradicted Ishikawa's confession, raising further doubts about whether his confession had been coerced. Flawed blood type analysis. The initial method used to determine the perpetrator's blood type from the semen sample was unprofessional and unreliable. As a result, the conclusion that the killer had blood type B was inaccurate. The shovel evidence was unreliable. A forensic expert pointed out that the shovel used as evidence did not necessarily come from the pig farm, and in fact, there was no concrete proof that it had been used to bury the body. During the initial examination, the police only compared the soil on the shovel with the soil near the victim's body. However, the similarity in soil composition could be explained by natural sediment deposition. Furthermore, since both the body and the shovel were found in the same wheat field, it was completely normal for the soil to match. As for whether the shovel came from the pig farm, there was no way to confirm this. The police's conclusion, based solely on the shovel's shape and traces of oil, was premature and speculative. Flawed witness identification procedures. The police's method of presenting suspects to witnesses was highly questionable. By only showing the witness a single suspect, they implicitly suggested that this person was the perpetrator. This technique greatly increased the likelihood of false identification. Additionally, the watch found in the wheat field, which the police claimed belonged to Yoshiko, was later discovered to actually belong to her older sister. The two watches were from the same brand, but were different models. In summary, most of the key evidence used to convict Ishikawa, including the handwriting, blood type analysis, confession, fountain pen, watch, and even witness testimony, was fundamentally flawed. Moreover, the mysterious deaths of more than 10 people connected to the case suggested that the forces behind the Sayama case were far more powerful than anyone initially imagined. Clearly, Ishikawa alone was not important enough to justify such extensive cover-ups and manipulations. This case was likely tied to a deeper power struggle, a hidden conflict that remained beneath the surface. To this day, the full truth remains unknown. The court has yet to issue a final decision on whether to grant a retrial. Now 84 years old, Ishikawa continues to fight to clear his name. Based on the overwhelming evidence of mishandling and fabrication, the chances of him being officially exonerated are high. But the real question remains: who was the true perpetrator of the Sayama case? That is something we still don't know. Additionally, there has long been a mysterious urban legend associated with the Sayama case. Many people believe that the 1988 film My Neighbor Totoro was actually a reflection of this crime. Internet users have even gathered supposed evidence to support this theory. For example, the setting of My Neighbor Totoro is Tokorozawa City, Saitama Prefecture, which borders Sayama City, where the crime occurred. Moreover, the original Japanese title of My Neighbor Totoro is Tonari no Totoro, which some claim bears a strange resemblance to the name Tonari no Sayama, neighboring Sayama. Strangely enough, on May 1, 2007, the film's producers issued a statement urging people not to believe these rumors. Coincidentally, this date marked exactly 44 years since the Sayama case. It was also the 60th birthday of Nakata Yoshiko. While these coincidences are intriguing, I personally believe they are purely circumstantial. Many of the supposed connections between My Neighbor Totoro and the Sayama case seem forced and speculative. Of course, this urban legend is not the central focus of the Sayama case. Even today, many people are still waiting for the truth to be revealed. Only time will tell if we ever get the real answer.